Good morning, CHD. It is Thursday, the 10th of April, 2025. And we are live here with Financial Rebellion on CHD TV. Good morning, Catherine. Good morning, Carolyn.
Good morning, Polly.
Let's get our first headline up, shall we? Okay, here we go. 8-year-old in West Texas died from hospital-acquired pneumonia. Medical records show. This is the Defender. This was out last night. But as you both know, we interviewed the first family, and we are due to interview the father of Daisy very shortly. And we've seen the medical records. Children's Health Defense has seen the medical records of both of these girls, and neither of them died from anything like measles. Measles, take that away. They did not die of measles, categorically. We've had 3 medical doctors looking at this, and our chief scientific officer. They've combed through it with everything they've got. They did not die of measles or from measles. End of.
They died with measles.
And the measles nothing to do with it. Both, it was medical.
Right, but they did have measles. They died with measles.
I'm not sure about Daisy. I've got the question mark out on that, because the parents said that she didn't have measles, and then when they got to hospital, a PCR test, which we all really do not trust, said she did have measles, and they saw a rash, and in the medical records there was a rash, then there wasn't a rash, then there was a rash. Come on, we weren't born yesterday. I don't buy that at all. That's just me, guys.
But, this trick was used to create a whole global pandemic. So not to say people weren't sick, and not to say they weren't dying, and of what is another question. But what we've seen is the abuse of medical stories, engineering people and hurting people into taking therapies or taking drugs, that are extremely dangerous to them. And I think the time has come, Polly, when we just have to hammer home, you cannot trust the media. You just cannot trust it. And, I keep saying all last year, the currency of the future will be relationships of trust. And you need to identify in all the different areas of your life who you can trust. And otherwise, you just need to turn them off, because the lies are extraordinary.
And people need to understand about this PCR test. I mean, it's just trash.
Yeah, there's more to come on that. We've got some of our doctors doing a bit more work on that behind the scenes, but definitely there was a massive red flag for me. I don't buy it at all. I mean, if your child has measles, for goodness sake, if she's got a fever. She was suffering from pneumonia. And in fact, at the end, after she died, they found that she had E. coli. So fundamentally, Daisy died from E. coli that she acquired in the hospital. It's
my God,
really sinister and dark and horrible. And that poor Mennonite community have suffered enough. If the people just leave them alone and the doctors would do their job. I mean, I'm a big one, parent to parent, and definitely not the views of Children's Health Defense, but do not take your child to hospital unless you absolutely have to. In this day and age, it's so dangerous. There's so many good doctors. Mennonite community have got Ben Edwards. There's so many good doctors around that can help you before you go in, because your child's got a bit of breathing issues, because they're likely to vent them. You know what, Catherine and Carolyn, having traveled on the bus, listening to all this COVID, these stories are just like the COVID hospital death.
Right.
Except for this time, they're killing children, not adults.
But here's the thing. You can find really good people who can help you with healthcare. You can find really good doctors. You can also find doctors who have privileges at hospitals who can watch over you if you have to go in. But you need to build those relationships now. You can't wait. And in the meantime, you need to become your own doctor. You need to do everything you can to take care of your own health, but create the relationship. So if you do have to go in, you have people watching. We have a lot of great interviews on the Solari Report about how to develop a healthcare proxy and make sure you've trained somebody to watch over you. And so whether it's a healthcare proxy or with doctors who have hospital privileges, you don't have to go in there naked. There is a way to protect you. Carolyn, you did a great interview with Jennifer on how to navigate the hospital system.
Well, getting a nurse on your side is really important.
You can hire your own nurse to come shadow you and protect you. And, and that's what Jennifer and her whole network does. So, You just need a way to stay out of hospitals if you can, but you need to be prepared. If you or your family need to go in, you have the people and the resources you need to navigate the place.
Well,
You
and
can't just go in cold.
there are ways to get things like oxygen, which is the reason that some people go to the emergency room. But if you talk to to a nurse who knows how to access various things, you can avoid going to the emergency room in a lot of cases when you otherwise would think you had to.
You know how many stories, and Kaylee, the first child, her parents said the same thing. Again, we haven't interviewed Daisy's father yet, but we are about to do that. But nearly all of these people that go to hospital during COVID, and Kaylee, the first measles death girl, they just took her to get her checked out. That's all. And what I'm saying is about hospitals, I don't particularly feel that's a safe place to go and get checked out. Go and get checked
Mm-mm.
out somewhere else. And then if you have to be in hospital, then as Catherine says and Carolyn, take your nurse and your doctor and the people that you love and trust. But I'm telling you, I don't think it's a good
So
idea.
in Tennessee, we have a network of nurse practitioners. And before you rush into the hospital, you go into the nurse practitioners and they can handle so many things and identify what your real problem is without a lot of the games.
And this is
So,
particularly important for people who have not been vaccinated or jabbed.
right, right.
They pretty much every single page of Daisy's massive medical records was unvaccinated, written all over her records. And Pierre Corey does a really good piece on that we've just released on Twitter or X or whatever it's called, talking about how it disgusts him. It shouldn't matter whether your child is vaccinated or unvaccinated. If your child is sick, the doctors have a duty to treat that child and not discriminate against. And Daisy definitely was. Those two families have been through living hell, to be honest. And
Right.
it all could have been prevented. Anyway, I could talk about this forever because I'm so mad about the whole thing. But let's move on to the next headline. Oh, it's not a headline. It's introducing homeopathy, the film. Yeah, that is airing tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern time on CHD TV. If you sign up for news alerts, Lou will send that out and alert you that we are live with introducing homeopathy. And we are so grateful to the homeopathy team for allowing us to put this on for another 10 days, I think it is. So thank you to them and enjoy it. It's very educational. Have you
And we
seen?
had it, yeah, we have it as movie of the week on the Solari Report. So I think this is so important because if you look at where the real solutions are going to come from, they're going to come from our improving our health and doing it on a highly economic basis. And homeopathy is absolutely a tool for you to, become your own doctor and use tools which are highly economic and will really help you with your health. We've seen remarkable results from homeopathy. Now, it takes an education, but this is where real solutions lie. So, Jeff, it's a great introduction. So, check out this movie.
I just finished the book Little Miracles Everywhere by Marcy Falick. And it's about a lot of it is about homeopathy. It's an interesting, very interesting sort of autobiographical book, but she gives anecdotes about treating animals. And when you see in the context of an animal, and the association with vaccines in the animals, it takes it out of the human context and says, "Oh my God, this homeopathy stuff really makes sense because animals have shorter lives and there are fewer excuses for, oh, that didn't really work." It's an interesting book, and I realized that I had met her at a Children's Health Defense conference, and actually she was at my table. So that's
Great.
a nice introduction.
So, I do want to mention that because we're going to talk about tariffs later in the show. But when I read China RX several years ago, at that point, when the book was published, if China stopped sending antibiotics ingredients to us, we would be out of antibiotics in the United States within several weeks. And if you look at the percentage that they make, whether it's ingredients or the whole product of our vitamins, very high percentage. And so, the time has come. If you look at what tariffs and trade wars are going to do to those prices, again, you need to start figuring out how to take excellent care of your health, and do it in a highly economic way. And so if you think it was economic to consider things like homeopathy, last week. Next week, the economics are going to change remarkably in favor of homeopathy. So take this as part of our storm warnings. You want to get interested in taking care of your own health.
Good point, Catherine. Okay, should we get on to our term of the day or the week?
Okay, so our term of the day is popsicle index. Let's go. We're going to show you a video.
The popsicle index is the percent of people in a community who believe a child can leave their home, go to the nearest place to buy a popsicle, and come home alone safely. When I was a little girl growing up in West Philadelphia, the popsicle index was 100%. It was unthinkable that we couldn't run up to Spruce Street, play the pins, get a popsicle, and come home alone at any time of day or early evening. Now, if you look at all 3,100 counties in America and in many places around the globe, what we've seen in the last 50 years is the Dow Jones index has gone up, 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 as the popsicle index is going down, down, down. And when I was Assistant Secretary of Housing, after the first month, I had this very anxious feeling, and I finally realized everyone makes money from the stock market going up, and I'm constantly being lobbied by people who want their stock to go up and the Dow Jones to go up, but nobody's lobbying me to get the popsicle index to go up because they don't perceive it as something that makes them money. And one of the reasons I became so interested in bringing financial transparency to money by place, particularly government investment, and then community venture funds, is I wanted to give people a way where they could make money, so you could make money in your 401k or your IRA in something that made the popsicle index go up. Because if you could create a financial constituency, if you will, for the popsicle index, then people could make money reducing energy costs, integrating new technology, making communities more wonderful, and having the popsicle index go up. And it's really, it's at that county or neighborhood level where we have to realign money with people. And so the popsicle index was a way for me to communicate to people, hey, we need the Dow Jones and the popsicle index to be friends instead of having a win-lose relationship.
Okay, so the idea of the popsicle index, Polly, was to get people to start thinking of re-engineering the relationship between people and living things within a place and money. And if you look at the last 50 years in America, and in many places around the globe, particularly in the Western world, you've had more and more government money engineering things in a community that make the Dow Jones go up, but not the popsicle, make the popsicle index go up. And there's a direct relationship between what's been happening with globalization and the government money model and the drop in the popsicle index. And I bring this up because our topic today is storm warnings. And what storm warnings is about is that the fact that the Western world and the whole global economy is now going through what is going to be a absolutely significant and gut-wrenching change. So since World War II, we had a trade model where essentially the US ran the reserve currency, the military made sure everybody took it, and we had an open trade model. Everybody could trade freely, and we did more and more globalization that was able to engineer more and more cheap goods. So if you go down to Walmart, the way the system worked for many years is the Chinese buy our treasuries. The US government uses the treasury money to hand out checks to everybody. They run down to Walmart, they buy Chinese goods, right? And so you see this enormous integration and coupling of the Chinese economy with the US economy. And that was made possible by a global trade model. Now, what has been happening is, ever since the financial crisis, the economics of that model have been changing and deteriorating, and the subsidy coming off from the reserve currency is no longer covering the military expenses and the sort of the interest on the debt. And so the US is looking at that. The G7 nations are looking at that and constantly talking about how to change the model. Now, the US was committed to building a unipolar global model, And their strategy in the Ukraine was, we're going to win in the Ukraine, implode Russia, and use the Russian resources to stay the hegemon vis-a-vis China. That strategy has now failed. And the US is in a position where it has to change the global model. And what's interesting is, if you listen to all the politics that have been, under discussion for the last year, what you hear many people saying is, well, we don't want to change. And my message to all of us is, guess what? This is fundamental economics. You have to change. There's no politician, there's no Congress, there's no leader who can keep things the way they were. The world is forcing us forward. One reason is because the BRIC nations, China, India, Russia, do not want to be controlled by us, and they don't want to be subject to control through the dollar. They want to be able to trade, and have payment systems where they're not controlled and sanctioned by the US. So there's a real tug of war. And what the president has just announced is that we are going to essentially decouple from the Chinese economy. First, he announces announces a trade war against everybody, but now logically he's backed into saying, okay, we're going to decouple from China. Now, let me explain what that means. 92% of our laptops come from China. I forget how many smartphones, but more than 70% of our smartphones come from China. If you look at electric blankets, 99% come from China. And one of the reasons we've been able to temper the inflation that we're experiencing is through this globalization, we've been able to take the price of many different goods and services, like electronics, like vitamins, like medicines, and bring them down, down, down by doing this trade with China. Okay, now that is about to reverse. And as it reverses, we're going to be dealing with anything we're getting from China and that area. We're going to be dealing with very significant increase in prices. So we see these shock estimates of, an iPhone is going to cost $3,000, but it's very, very significant. So I want to talk about inflation and what this change in the global model could do, particularly tariffs in China. And our theme today is storm warning, get prepared, because you need to know that, one, this is a model change, and no change of Congress or no change of president is going to stop it. The horse is out of the barn. It's going to happen. It's fundamental economics. It's technology too. But there is an opportunity to do more for ourselves here. Let me give you one other statistic. In Tennessee last year, in 2024, the residents of Tennessee imported $22.7 billion of goods from China. We exported $3.7 billion, which means we're running a $17 to $18 billion trade deficit with China. A lot of that product's pumping through Walmart. If those products go up 10, 15, 25, 30% in price, imagine what that does to household budgets. Okay, so let's take a look at inflation in America, real inflation. So I want to introduce you to something called the Chapwood Index. So if we could bring up the first chart, Lou. So there was an investment advisor in Chicago who created the Chapwood Index many years ago, and his mother had experienced tremendous deterioration in her purchasing power in retirement. And he said, the official CPI and inflation statistics from, the government and the Federal Reserve just don't reflect the real inflation people are dealing with. And so he put together an index called the Chapwood Index, where he measured the 50 basic household items we would buy, like eggs, like utilities, like, basic services. And when he started, he did 50. Now he's moved to 150. If you go to the Chapwood Index website, you can see all the different, it's Carolyn will relate. There's pet food there, Carolyn. Anyway, and what he does is he maintains the real cost of goods, or the real increase in the cost of goods for the 50 top metropolitan areas in the United States. And this is a picture 2 days ago of the top, the ones with the highest average increases. And as you can see, a lot in California, So we see Oakland is the one with the highest inflation rate. And again, this is not monetary inflation, but household good inflation. San Francisco number 2, Long Beach, then San Jose. Then we flip to the East Coast, Boston, back to California for 2 more cities. Then we go to Washington State, back to California, then Portland, Oregon. So those are just the top 5. If you go to chapwoodindex.com, you can find it for the city that is closest to you if you live in the United States. So they don't, we need somebody in Europe and we need somebody down under to do a Chapwood index. But what you see is the real costs of inflation that we have been dealing with for the last 10 years. If you look at globalization, it started to turn down at the financial crisis, and that's when the Chapwood Index started to measure this. So as globalization has sort of reversed and is deglobalizing, we are watching those prices steadily go up. And as it accelerates, now we're going to see very significant inflation. Now, the question is, where's the opportunity? The opportunity is if it's more expensive to buy it from China, what can we do more for ourselves? What can I and my family do more for me? What can I do with my neighbors in my community? What are the businesses I can start that will create more of what we need? How can it's amazing how much agriculture we import from China. How can we grow more food locally? What are the things we can do locally? How can we create businesses that are going to do that? And we have, as that happens, an opportunity to build businesses that start getting the popsicle index to go up, because the safety and health of our children are number one. And if you look at the problems we have as a nation economically, our number one problem is health. We have significant deterioration in health. We have significant deteriorations in IQ. One of the problems of competing with China is if you look at any sort of published metric of IQs, their IQ, our IQ has been falling, and theirs are much, much higher than ours. And that is a real competitive issue. So we wanted to talk about storm warnings because we want everyone to understand that a trade war and tariffs and acceleration of deglobalization, it didn't start this year, it started years ago, but and particularly with the financial crisis. Deglobalization is upon us, and it means that we are all going to be dealing with significant inflation in our lives.
Okay, so how do we prepare? Storm warnings, what are some of the things that we should be doing? Growing our own food if we can, or getting with people, that whole celery circle that we talked about before, getting with people.
Right. You need to find other people who want to prepare. You want to, and I always start with food, because one thing you can always do more competitively in your local area is grow food. If you need to rebuild the soil, learn how to rebuild the soil and grow fresh food, and do it in a way in concert with people in your local area. Find the farmers markets, find the food groups. I always tell people, go find the Western price groups, because you have a lot of food groups around the country, and start figuring out how you can organize either your family or with others to both bring your food prices down, but radically improve the quality of your nutrition.
You might need to invest in a greenhouse, because with the geoengineering, they're spraying so much poison down on our beautiful organic gardening.
Right. So that is something you can do. Another thing you can do, and we've beaten this drum, and we just published the big book, and we have it up on the website, What the States Can Do. There is so much you can do to make local farming much more economic if you get into the state house and you start getting the laws and regulations changed. So we've been banging the drum. Who is your state representative? Who is your state senator? Get to know them and start working with them, and start rolling back the laws that are impinging your financial freedom and your health freedom. And we've built a wonderful sort of encyclopedia of everything you can do to protect financial freedom. There's a wealth on the CHD website about what you can do to protect health freedom. I have to sort of introduce our next guest. So people always say, well, I don't know my representatives and I don't know if I can do this and this is really too hard and blah, 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 blah. And yet what we've seen is we just had Daniel Goodrich on the Financial Rebellion, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks ago. So Danielle just decided during COVID, I'm going to do something about this. She gets to know her state representatives. She marches into Tennessee with a bill saying, I'm going to stop geoengineering. And she gets a bill passed as a citizen activist to outlaw geoengineering in Tennessee. Now that's step one. There's a lot more to do if we're really going to get it done. So right now we can only enforce if the plane takes off and lands in Tennessee. So a lot more that needs to be done. But now we're seeing lots of other states do it. So that was one example.
And
But
we had her on Financial Rebellion, so you can go
Right.
back.
So
Look at
the
them.
last Financial Rebellion, we had Amy Miller and Bernadette Pajer, who have literally stopped the bill for pesticides. So we can celebrate the fact that Amy and Bernadette and their colleagues, Monsanto and Bayer, are trying to get bills passed that would give them indemnification so they cannot be sued if farmers or anybody associated with the food system is harmed by the chemicals they're putting in their pesticides and what they're doing to the soil and land. So this indemnification meant they were completely protected from even fraud. And so Amy and Bernadette and a whole group of people went to work and have done a great job of getting that bill stopped and pushed off. And so we see this battle coming into the State House. Many people are enthusiastic about what is happening at the federal level in terms of health. But if you look at the opposition and the problems at that level, I assure you the way we're going to make significant progress is if we get into the State House. So we do have a guest to join us for the second half of the show. She's been on CHD many times, but she's had a huge success in Idaho. And this is exact proof. I dare say, once upon a time, Leslie was sitting on Wall Street with a very successful career, and she knew nothing about her state legislature. So this is somebody who moved to Idaho, figured out where the legislature was, got to know her legislators, and now has achieved one of the great accomplishments in health freedom in the country. So Leslie, come on in and tell us all about it. Welcome back to CHD.
So great to be with all of you guys, Catherine, Carolyn, Polly. Yeah, no, I grew up in Idaho from about the age of 12, and Boise was 3 hours away, and politics was a million miles away from me. I mean, I just never ever thought about it. But, I was living in London working on Wall Street, and I'm sure you guys have heard me tell the story about how I was responsible for all of the European shares at Alliance Capital. I'd gone from Goldman Sachs to Alliance Capital, which was one of my big clients, and I was running their European growth portfolio management and research businesses. And it was my job to interview the CEOs of multinational corporations, and a CEO of one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies that we all know came into the office along with his whole management team, the CFO, head of R&D, and the investor relations, and their new blockbuster drug, which is the reason that we own the stock, was there were rumors leaking out that it was causing death in some people. And so he came in and said, it's very rare. It's very rare. Where have we heard that before, right, everyone? And he said, don't worry about it. The stock was down 25 or 30%. He was going to see big investors in order to reassure us that we should stick with the stock. And he said after that, listen, the bad news is the FDA is going to make us put a black box warning on our packaging. The good news is we still think we can do $7 billion in peak sales. And I was just like, oh my goodness, they're going to kill people. And they think that we are reassured by that everything's okay. And that just ripped the veil from my eyes. And I thought, oh my goodness, I am playing for the wrong team. And then I got married and had a child. And once I had a child, that little precious thing was in my charge, right, to take care of and protect. And when I learned about the whole vaccine debate, I just thought, oh my gosh, I would be just reckless if I were to inject him with this stuff, even though I thought it was really scary. This is back in 2002. And my husband and I, we went to every talk you could hear about vaccines. We read, there weren't very many books available back then, but we read Neil Z. Miller's book, Vaccines, Are They Really Safe and Effective? And I mean, the first thing I did, I'm like an analyst geek by nature. I go in the back and there are 960 plus footnotes in the mainstream medical literature and all these things. And I just thought, oh my goodness, I've got to make a movie about this and I just thought, I was so naive. I really believed if I just ended up making a movie about this whole issue and researching it further to verify what was in that book for myself, that somebody would do something. That's what I thought. Somebody would do something. Somebody in power, once they knew the truth, they would do something. And wow, was I in for a rude awakening. But anyway, that's how it all happened, Catherine. I'm working on Wall Street and I have this like veil ripped from my eyes, like the world is not what you think. And then I learned about the vaccine debate and I'm just like, okay, I got to take care of my baby. And then I realized that I actually had been vaccine injured myself. I didn't know that that was what was causing all my problems. And so that like just led me down this garden path.
So tell us how you decided to work with the legislature tell us first the mandate that has or the legislation that has now been signed into law,
Yeah.
and tell us how you decided to do it and the process by which you went through to do it.
Well, the reason I wanted to give that background too is so that people understand, like, I became a mother and that is what really changed me. I knew about how corrupt these people were on Wall Street, and I knew that I was playing for the wrong team and using all my, my experience, my education and everything for the wrong guys, like for the bad guys. And I thought, I can't do this. And so once I had my son, I quit Wall Street. I mean, I left because I couldn't handle it. And I just said, I'm going to commit my life to doing good and to trying to fight for people who can't fight for themselves. And so that's been the last 24 years of my life. And I moved home to Idaho where I grew up. Before we moved here, I investigated what the laws were surrounding vaccinations and come to find out we have the best exemption in the nation. You can exempt your child from vaccinations for any reason you choose in the state of Idaho. And so that reassured me. But once I got here, I realized that, okay, it's not as good as I thought it was. And that's when I realized I had to start doing it. And so the swine flu, in 2009, when that happened, they gave people the swine flu vaccine, even though this was a complete scam. They gave Idahoans the swine flu vaccine and they were illegally entering adults into the immunization registry in the state of Idaho without their knowledge or consent or legal cover. And this is what really got me involved. It got me to realize that I needed to be, what do they say, that the cost of freedom is eternal vigilance. So I realized I had to do it. And so I went to the legislature and there was a man who was the head of the Senate Health and Welfare Committee. And he had worked for my father, who was a real estate developer. And this man was like a flooring contractor or something like that. He let me come and present on vaccines to his committee, having no idea what he was in for. And so I did this like 10 or 15-minute presentation to his committee, and we stopped the extension of the immunization registry because we had like 200 people write in, which was a huge number back then. He said he had never seen anything like it. He had never seen that kind of public engagement. And so, my community, they were up in arms and freaking out about what was going on, and they wanted to protect their kids, and they figured that this was just one thing to the next. And so this is what really catalyzed my engagement in local politics in Idaho. And then to answer your question specifically, there have been many fights that we have had to engage in over the last 15 years in the state of Idaho. You would have thought that everything was fine because of this law that's, codified. And yet what's happened is that they're constantly trying to take away our rights. And so 10 years ago, I and three others, two of whom are our local executive directors, Misty Karlfeld and Sarah Clendenin, we formed something called Health Freedom Idaho because we knew that we had to really push back. And this is a local force to be reckoned with. And that's separate, ancillary to Health Freedom Defense Fund, which I didn't found until 2020. But they were they're closer to Boise. They can do the on the ground, boots on the ground engagement. And when 2020 hit, I started Health Freedom Defense Fund. And then, of course, with all the draconian measures, our governor was awful. He's supposedly a Republican, supposedly embraces conservative values of individualism and freedom, but he completely violated everything. And he had the businesses and the local health departments do his bidding. And so what we did was, after witnessing what happened in the last 5 years, last summer, we've been thinking about it, but I really thought, you know what, the time is right for us to actually push for absolute freedom in the state of Idaho. And we're going to do, I think, really well in the elections in the fall. And that happened. And so we elected, 8 senators who were Liberty senators, almost to have control of the Senate. And we already were very close. And we're now within 1 seat of controlling the Idaho House. So what I did was I wrote a bill called the Idaho Medical Freedom Act, using a bill that had already been passed in 2023. That bill is called the Coronavirus Stop Act, and it outlawed any state, educational, or business entity from mandating any coronavirus shot. And I thought, listen, we've already agreed to this. Why are we singling out coronavirus shots? Why should it matter whether or not it's a coronavirus shot or something else? Why should anyone be able to condition my employment or my education or my purchase of services or entry to a business or anything like that, or engagement in public life on my receipt or use of any kind of a medical intervention? So I took the bill and I expanded it to every medical intervention that I could think of, whether it's a drug, a pill, an injection, a medication, anything, a device.
And so that includes masks, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because it's a device, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, this really sprung from my belief. And, once you've had a child, you are so for me, I just was so protective of this beautiful infant that was gifted to me, and I would do anything to protect him. And it helps you to start to realize the importance of so many things that we just take for granted or never think about. So I had never really thought about medical freedom or health freedom before. It never occurred to me until I wanted to go against the grain. And then you start to understand, I want to do something different. And then that brought to me, well, okay, so who owns me? Who owns my body? And this is the conversation that I think that we need to be having across the nation. And this is why I started Health Freedom Defense Fund, to really educate people about what their rights and freedoms are, and then to help them to advocate for them and to litigate when necessary. And I think it all needs, my whole mission is to have this conversation and establish, or maybe it's reestablish, this basic and fundamental human right that each and every one of us is responsible for our bodies and making choices about them with respect to medical and health choices. And that, no one else should be intervening, and no one else knows our history or background. And most importantly, no one else has to live with the consequences of our choices. And so this is really the impetus behind it, and the bill passed on Friday.
Leslie,
So,
I have a question.
Go ahead, Carolyn. Go ahead.
Did you feel that or did you have lawyers involved in this, or did you go do specific research to understand how this whole process works, or and who were the other people who were instrumental in carrying some of the weight?
So my thinking on it was, I'm going to take this bill that's already passed because it's clearly already been vetted, right? And so I took that and I adapted it. I expanded. One of my colleagues, Sarah Clendenin, who's an executive director at Health Freedom Idaho, she helped to expand the language of schools to encompass any and every conceivable kind of educational institution. It says any in the definition of schools repeatedly, meaning post-secondary, meaning any kind of college, anything, any educational institution. I did not work with any attorneys. I but having run Health Freedom Defense Fund now for the last 5.5 years, I have a fairly good understanding of how to think like an attorney. And so what we did was Sarah worked on that school definition, and then I worked on the medical definition. And then Senator Dan Foreman, who was our initial sponsor, he ran everything through he reviewed it. He thought it was really good the way that it was written, and he ran it through what's called the Legislative Services Office, and they said they thought it was fantastic. And so we went with it, but there were no other attorneys. And my big argument was, you've already passed coronavirus ban. What's different about this? Why does anyone else think that they should have any right to tell us what to do? And so I think it made a heck of a lot of sense because it was a pretty easy ask and common sense, right? I mean, and so these people, I think this is something else that helps us, is that no one else, or in the last 5 years, there have been over 12,000 reports to the vaccine adverse events reporting system from Idahoans of injuries and death. And so, in a state of only 2 million people, pretty much everybody knows somebody
Right.
who's been impacted. And there's a man here named Doug Cameron, who's actually a dear long-term family friend of my father's. And he has been in a lot of, he's in Died Suddenly and many of the other movies. And he was coerced by his employer to take a COVID shot. He was like a foreman at a dairy. He had, like 100 people under him. And his boss, who had cancer, said, Doug, I want you to get that shot. He's like, I don't want to get the shot. He's like, well, I want you to go around and get all of the people who are under you to get the shot. He's like, I don't want the shot. Well, I really think you should get the shot. It would set a really good example for everybody else. And I have cancer and I want everyone to get the shot. Well, he went and did it. And he's paralyzed from the diaphragm down and sits in a wheelchair for the rest of his life while his former boss is dead and gone. So that's been helpful in a very painful way. But, Carolyn, we didn't use attorneys. I felt that we didn't really need to because Sarah has done a tremendous amount of work legislatively. I have now too over the years, inserting language and pushing back against bad language that are in bills. And then we had Senator Foreman in the Legislative Services Office, and this bill had already passed muster.
Right. So let me bring up that every state legislator, as far as I know, does have a group that is in charge of taking bills proposed by any member of the legislature and making sure they're in conformity with the legislative language and process. And so there is the equivalent of a legislative attorney involved always before it makes it into committee.
That is the Legislative Services Office.
Exactly.
So that's the one.
And other states have that. I've seen that in a number of states.
Every state has that, and so you don't have to get it perfect. You just have to get it to the point where they can check it.
Yeah. So that's what happens.
Leslie, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Now
I'm hearing
go ahead, Carolyn.
you say that how important it is to have on your team people who know all the different aspects of and the effects in society of what your legislation is, like in your case, the schools. So networking, it sounds like networking is incredibly important here.
Well, I think it's the grassroots that we have put in place in the last 15 years. So if you look at what's happened in Idaho, there is this fantastic law that says that you can exempt your child for any reason from a vaccine in order to go to school. And it says that all that's required is to submit a signed statement by the parent that their child is exempt for religious or other reasons. You don't have to state anything. Just it's religious or other reasons, and you sign it. Leslie J. Manookian. That's it. But here's what happened. The Department of Health and Welfare drafted this very damning, form that it wanted parents to sign. So the school district, or rather the Health and Welfare Department, was instructing school districts that they had to require parents to sign this form in violation of Idaho law. There's a difference between rules and regulations, which are promulgated by the executive agencies, the state agencies that sit under the governor, and the code, the statute that's enacted by the legislature. And so we have been pushing back for 15 years, explaining to our representatives and senators that the Department of Health and Welfare is overstepping its statutorily granted authority. They're forcing parents to sign this form that says that, I know that I am willingly endangering my child by not giving them this vaccine or that vaccine. So we force them first to change the language to make it far more innocuous. Then we force them to back down from using the form at all. And now parents just sign a statement. And then they were also not communicating to parents that the law says that they can exempt their children for any reason they choose. So we then force them to require schools to inform parents of their rights every single time they communicate with parents about vaccinations. So my point is, we've done all these things over the last 10 years. The legislature knows us. They have faith in us. They know that we know what we're talking about. We have credibility, we have relationships. And so you add COVID onto that, which woke up, just ripped their eyes open, right? They now see how egregious these violations of our rights are. They now see that the CDC and federal health agencies can't be trusted. And therefore, by extension, they have to be very cautious about the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare. And so many of them are actually fighting for us. And I think it's not something that happened overnight. It's something that, I've been working on for over 15 years. And I think the other thing is that elections really matter. So if you look at what happened in the last election, we had a huge win in terms of almost taking over both chambers of the House with people who believe in freedom, people who are liberty legislators. And I believe that we will take over next year in 2026, in the next cycle of elections. There's no doubt in my mind, because 4-1, people who are moving to Idaho are moving here for freedom.
Right. Now, Leslie, how do you get people to understand that if they want to change things, they need to do it at the state level?
Yeah.
So a lot of this is, we all deal with many, many people who are very enthralled with the entertainment of national politics, and put a lot of hope when, in fact, the real action, if you look at your time and money, getting freedom-minded candidates elected and getting things done at the state house is really where the action is.
100%. It is. So we have a governor who only signed the Idaho Medical Freedom Act because he had to, because we boxed him in. He vetoed it the first time,
right,
saying that the reason that he was vetoing it was because he was concerned that parents, that we were violating parents' rights to a safe school environment for their children because sick children couldn't be sent home. This was complete fabrication. We said nothing about the existing code that said that children could be sent home. That code still exists. So we called his bluff. So he vetoed the first bill, which means you have to bring a new bill. So we brought a new bill. But what happened was that the senator that I was working with initially, he brought a new bill. He went and met with the governor's office. And after promising me he would not change any of the language in the bill, he went and coordinated with the governor's office, and they inserted language excluding daycares. And I was aghast. I was freaking out because I did not want, that's the vast majority of people in America who receive shots are under the age of 3.
Right.
That's all daycares. So they were trying to cut out all private daycares in the state of Idaho. And that's almost all daycares. And so I was just like, absolutely not, do not move forward. Well, he went and moved forward anyway. And he presented the bill in committee, this bill with this horrific language in it that literally offered up our children. And I was sickened, and I told him so. And I said it was evil. He did it anyway. But what happened was the sponsor on the House side, Representative Rob Beiswanger, he was texting me saying, don't worry, it's not over. And what happened was the House brought their own bill to compete with this bad bill that was my original bill with this new language inserted. And then the House brought my exact bill with language inserted that reassured the governor that this legislation in no way contradicts the existing law that allows schools to send sick children home. So they called his bluff, and basically you had competition. This is why I'm saying it's so important to have people on the inside fighting for you, because literally this legislation died 5 times and rose from the ashes 5 times before it was finally signed on the very last day of the session. At the very last moment, it was the last piece of legislation signed into law by Governor Little at 4:42 last Friday. Literally, it closed the session.
Right. And I remember because we were all on social media telling everybody to call, but you can never it's trench warfare. You can just
was.
never quit. You just never quit. You just never quit. And that's what gets it done. It's very, the state legislative process is very exciting.
Thousands of people called.
Right.
They kept
Leslie,
pressure.
did-
So
did
let
you
me just, Carolyn, can I just answer Catherine's question? Because I wanted people to understand this is how it works.
Yes.
And we cannot count, or first of all, health laws are state laws.
Right.
Laws are part of the police powers, which are reserved to the states by the US Constitution. And this is a good thing. Had we not had this reservation to the states, we would have been Canada or Australia or Britain in
Right.
COVID. That is the safeguard that was gifted to us by our founders, and we should all be thanking them for it, because that is how we were able to sue, how HFDF was able to sue the federal government in 2021 and defeat the federal travel mask mandate in 2022, because CDC is not authorized to tell us what to do with our health. Okay?
Right.
Because it's a state right. So all these people say, we need to do this federally. No. The last thing I want is for someone to do this federally, because first of all, they don't have the power. It's an undelegated authority to the feds if they were to assume it. Secondly, it's a safeguard against tyranny. Thirdly, if they were to usurp that power, then the next guy could just undo it. And that's the last thing we want. We want 50 states pursuing their own path and resisting and acting as a bulwark against federal authority. And so
let me just mention one thing. Now that Idaho has done this, makes it so much easier for your state representative or senator to take a copy of the legislation from Idaho, take it to legislative services in their state, say, how would we do this here, and march forward with it. And because when you say to a representative or senator, well, Idaho's already done it, that Leslie, how much easier that makes. And so this can spread virally across the country.
that's my plan.
Right. So how do we get a copy of the bill? Can we get a copy of the final
Well, you
legislation?
can get a copy of the bill. It's on the legislative website. You just have to go to engrossment number 2 in order to ensure that you have the right bill. But let me tell you that we are creating a model bill, which will be posted on Health Freedom Defense Fund's website under the resources page.
Oh, wonderful.
Resources tab. And I'm just, look, this was so fast.
Right.
We didn't know. I literally woke up Friday morning thinking that I was going to have to agree to a bill that I didn't like. And I spoke with leadership in the Idaho House, and they were like, what do you want? What do you want to take out? What do you want to do? What do you want to add? And we were able to actually do something. Paula, you will love this. We inserted language at the 11th hour that says that no healthy, unvaccinated person may be excluded in the event of a disease outbreak.
Wow.
Do you know why that's so important? Because that's the stick that they use to beat parents into bending. Because if your kid can be excluded for 7 days or 14 days or 21 days, that's a huge threat, because then you can't work. Right? And so let's just say that someone else in the school has measles. Your kid that's unvaccinated gets excluded, even though your kid is healthy. Or chickenpox, and even though you may want your kid to get the chickenpox. So this is no longer allowed in the state of Idaho. And our bill says that no state entity can enact any kind of code or regulation that contradicts this code, which means even emergency orders cannot contradict this. This is huge. And this was all inserted on Friday morning, April 4th.
So I just have to add, I think this is going to be really good for Idaho's tax base, because many very wealthy, talented people are going to say, wow, we can be free in Idaho. Let's go to Idaho.
I've seen hundreds of people say that, like, oh my gosh.
Yes,
we need to-" And
absolutely.
listen, if you look at the last 7 years or so, there was an analysis of the person who's been moving to Idaho. 4-1, they're people coming for liberty. They're fleeing
Right.
California, Oregon, Washington, New York, Illinois. They're fleeing those places and coming here for freedom. So,
Right.
so we're going to put up a model bill, Catherine, and
Okay.
and then we are mapping out a plan of how we're going to partner with someone, because HFDF is a 501c3 and we are limited to 10% of our activities being
Right.
lobbying. So we're
Right.
we're exploring who we're going to team up with and how that's going to look, but we are
Okay.
going to try and make this a nationwide effort. And yes, it's like psychologically, you think about this. So there was this snowboarder called the Flying Tomato. Did you guys ever hear of him? Shaun White.
No.
Okay.
No.
In the Olympics, he won I think he won gold medals in the Olympics 4 times. He was this amazing California kid who just dreamed and thought he could do stuff. He did, I think, a quadruple flip on a snowboard. He was the first one to do 2, 3, 4. My point is that he broke the kind of consciousness barrier, right?
Right.
It's a huge thing when we believe that something can't be done.
Right.
And once someone does it, it's like the 100th monkey. Then
Right.
everyone goes, yeah, we can do it. Well, we just freaking broke the door down in Idaho, and now other states can follow suit. And so we're going to create a package that makes it so easy for you to do it in your state. And coming full circle again, this is not going to happen by someone saving you in Washington. This is going to happen because you, usually mothers, have engaged. They have credibility with their legislators. They have relationships, and you're going to take the package of information that we're going to create and work to get this passed in your state, and we can do it. And I just think, this has always been my motto. My parents instilled this ethos in me from a very young age. Just believe and just go out and put one foot in front of the other, and you will be able to accomplish your dreams. That's all we have to do is believe, folks. Don't think about all the problems or all the obstacles. Just do it.
Right. Right. And I do have to say, there are so many freedom-minded, excellent legislators who are open to talking with you. This is not like dealing with a federal politician. This is somebody who's really close to their constituents, and many of them are citizens legislatures. So they have businesses, they live in the community, they work in the community, they understand your world, and they are, I found them to be remarkably accessible to their constituents.
And they're way more accessible than the governor. They're way more beholden than your governor, because they live in your community and their kids go to school with you or their grandchildren. And those races are way cheaper and easier. So, I really encourage people to engage, because this is how we're going to take the country back, is by, engaged, concerned Americans, principled Americans, entering politics at the local level and taking back their state house. That's how we're going to do it. It's way cheaper than fighting for the governor. Don't worry about the governor. You can paint your governor into a box like we did.
No, but it's also, if you're in a state that's got a great governor, it's wonderful. So I'm working with lots of different states, and the states where they have a great governor, God, it's a blessing. So if you can get the governor changed, do it.
Yes, I'm not saying not, but the thing is, it's hard for us to do that in Idaho. It's way more expensive. But what we can do is take back the legislature and then force his hand.
Right.
At the end of the day, he said that he was concerned about sick kids being excluded, so we gave him that. What was he going to do on the second iteration of the bill?
You can absolutely box people if you have enough people pressing, and that's why, we've got to turn off the TV and get back into the State House.
Yeah, and people need to be aware that there's an organization called the New Horizons Daycare. This daycare is the largest daycare operator in the nation and in Idaho. And we don't know this for sure, but I think we know this. The son of the daycare operator is on the Idaho, somehow works with the Education Association. I think the Idaho Education Association, or maybe a national one. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that they were just able to get a carve out for daycares in Minnesota, where they're based. This is something that I think they're trying to do nationwide. So we need to be super vigilant. I believe that the governor did a bait and switch, said he was concerned about sick kids being sent home, and then met with the sponsor, who took it at face value, who knows what really happened, and cut out, gave the carve out for daycares. And if it hadn't been for the people in the House fighting for us, that bad bill would have gone forward. We were able to remove that language. But my point is, this big, powerful company is working to take away the rights of the most vulnerable, babies to 3 years of age. And people need to be aware of that and really be on the lookout. There are different names that they use as well, but we need to be paying attention. And there's actually a lawsuit that's going to be heard in front of the Idaho Supreme Court on May 5th against New Horizons. Literally, I think this is why they were doing it, because if they could get this into code right now, it would indicate that the legislature wanted medical freedom for everybody but babies and toddlers, and they would be able to find in favor of the daycare, not the parents.
Wow. Okay, Polly.
I have a quick question. Is it a matter of just calling up your state representative and say, I want to come in and talk to you? I mean, if you don't have contacts the way you had with your through your father or whatever, or do you need to get a bunch of people together? Do you need to have an organized group with a name, or what? Just to start the process.
Well, Carolyn, just to be clear, that guy, Senator Lee Hyder, once he heard, once I made my presentation and somebody gave him a talking to, he completely double-crossed me. So it didn't help at all in the end. It only helped when I had the element of surprise.
So I just want to mention, if you go to Solaria, we have a pamphlet called Working Successfully with State Leaders Who Will Take Responsibility, and it walks you through how to get to know your legislative representatives. And I would strongly encourage, it's a way to get going, and circle up with some of your neighbors, and get yourself educated. It can be fun doing this. So I dare say, Leslie, you've met a lot of people and had a very interesting time.
So let me just say, you should look up on the website, on the state website, who is your legislator, and you will probably have one senator or two senators and multiple representatives, most likely, or assembly persons. And for us, they actually do like Pizza and Politics, where they host it at least twice a year, and they come to our community and they meet with people. And so that's one way to meet with them. And then the other thing is to get a group of people and go visit them. Usually it's easier to get to know them out of the legislative session time, because they're so busy. They're working from 5 a.m. until 10 o'clock at night very often. And they don't, it's much harder to get contact. So do it when they're out of session. It's way, way easier. Just call them up or send them an email and say, listen, I'm interested in these issues, and I would like to know, have 15 minutes or a half an hour, or take you to coffee or to lunch, or meet you for those things. And I want to hear where you stand and discuss these topics with you. We want to know their constituents.
We've gone way over time, Polly, so you have to wrap us up. Leslie, we can't thank you enough. And again, congratulations. This is a huge victory for all of us. We can't thank you enough.
Thank you so much, you guys, for all the support. And
it's inspirational what you've done. And I know that so many people have been sending you love, but really, I hope you're feeling it, because we're so grateful for you, because you're fighting for the future, and that's what we all want. So thank you so much, Leslie, and for coming on. We love having you on because you speak so well. It's fascinating. All right, everybody, we are going to be bringing on now another autism story, or vaccine injury story. It's Christina. She did exactly as she was told to do by the doctors with her son. I know you all know the ending, but we're going to keep playing it every single day until everybody gets it into their heads. From everybody here at Solari and CHD-TV, much love to you all. Pray big, stand firm, never settle. And we'll be back next week. Bye, everyone.
My name is Christina Markowitz.
And how many children have you got?
I have two.
How old are they both now?
My son is 9 and my daughter is 6.
Okay, and this is about your son?
About my son, yes.
Okay, so now this is a little different to the normal story that we tell. It's not the sort of typical Billy story or the story of the lady we just had. Right. Okay, so first of all, I want to ask you, when you were pregnant with your first child, could I have called you anti-vaccine?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not, no.
Tell us how you were about vaccines.
I was pretty much raised that you believed whatever the doctors told you to do, You did whatever they said, and whatever they told you, you better do that. And that included getting vaccines, medicines, antibiotics, you name it, you did it. So when I was pregnant with my son, and I will have a little preface there that we had to use fertility drugs to get pregnant as well.
And you were completely vaccinated?
I was completely vaccinated, yes. Yes, it was.
And do you mind me asking how old you are, just so we can gauge? Just give me an average, just like, you know,
The bracket.
Yeah. I mean, you're not, I'm 50, and I'm proud of it. I'm alive.
I'm 39.
Okay.
I'm 39.
Just so we can get a gauge of what kind of vaccines you had as well.
Sure, yeah. Certainly not as many as now. I can definitely say that for sure. When I was pregnant with my son, we found out that he had an enlarged kidney in utero, and we had several ultrasounds for him.
So that's really important, people. They were told via scan that your little boy had an enlarged kidney. So already we know
There's something wrong.
that he's not. But interestingly enough, the doctors told
me, don't worry about it. We'll just watch it for the first year of life. Sometimes it heals on its own, and other times you might have to go in and do a simple surgery to fix it.
But what about vaccines for that boy with the enlarged kidney?
They said nothing. They said you just go about and continue the schedule. The vaccines are for everybody. Everybody needs to do them regardless.
Regardless of enlarged kidney, child possibly not being as strong as a normal child.
Right. And being the person that had been brought up that you just believed whatever the doctors tell you, I remember thinking, being pregnant, it was starting to become a thing where people were talking about vaccines. And I thought, wow, I'm seeing all these specialists. I've seen, multiple pediatricians, multiple, nephrologists, multiple, pediatricians and whatnot. They're all telling me the same thing. So I felt as though in my mind, I was getting multiple opinions about it. So I thought, well, I'm just going to do what they say. So I just went ahead and followed the schedule.
Now, when he was born, he had the vitamin K.
He did.
And the hepatitis B.
Yes, he did.
And the reason why this story is a little different is that you actually think there was something wrong from that day forward.
From that day forward, after he received those two things, I noticed the day we brought him home from the hospital, which was like the third day of his life. I think they vaccinated him the day before. He screamed, like the highest pitched scream I've ever heard in my whole life, all night long, as a 3-day-old child. Couldn't get him to feed, couldn't get him to do anything, just screaming. Couldn't get him to latch, couldn't get him to do anything. All he wanted to do was scream. And from that point on, he had tremendous feeding issues. I couldn't get him to breastfeed. I couldn't get him to do anything other than feed slowly, because he would fall asleep feeding every time. And then as soon as he would finish, which would take at many times hours to feed him, he would throw it all up. And then you'd start all over again. So.
And what did the doctor say about this?
They just said he had acid reflux. We tried all sorts of acid reflux drugs.
So he's being put on drugs.
But yeah, being put on drugs. But at the same time,
is anyone taking into account that this boy still has this inflamed or enlarged kidney?
Nobody would attribute anything to that. Nobody would attribute anything. They said, well, he's okay right now. They would, they just like, his urine and whatnot. And they said, well, it's fine. So they really didn't think that was a big deal. And they just attributed that, the acid reflux was a stomach thing. Nobody ever talked about the kidney thing. Ever. Nobody ever brought it up. So, going from that point.
And do you keep vaccinating him, do you?
Of course. Yes, of course. Because everybody says it's safe, you keep doing it. And the other thing I will point out as well that, just drives me crazy that I can't believe that I went along with is that every time I would bring him to get vaccinated, they would give him Tylenol before they even gave it to him.
They would give him
the Tylenol. And then they would tell you to give it to him every 4 hours. I have it listed right
Okay,
on the
so
sheets.
you're there with your baby, and they're like, okay, we're going to give him a spoonful of Tylenol, and then they vaccinate him.
That's correct. That's correct.
Bloody Nora. Excuse
Yep.
my language.
That's correct. That's what they were doing. And I didn't know any better. I just thought, oh, well, like I started just sore from it. Yeah, I had no idea.
Sure, no. Of course you didn't know any better.
Yeah, I had no
And then they
idea.
told you every 4 hours give him more Tylenol.
More Tylenol. Which
For the rest of
perhaps-
his life, or for how long are we doing this?
For however long he didn't feel good.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I don't think I probably did it every 4 hours. I probably thought that was a little overkill, but I mean, this is what they were telling you to do.
Sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And I think what really started to turn like the tides, because he really was just compounded, like one shot after another, after another, after another. And at 6 months, he received, I think it's like 6 vaccines. Like
Do you have them written down? Can you read them out to us? 6 months. So we've got an inflamed kidney. We're on psychotropic drugs and all God knows what else.
Right.
And lots of Tylenol.
So at 6 months, he had the DTaP, IPV, the Hib, PCV, and he also had Hep B and rotavirus.
Poor little baby.
One day. A week and a half later, my husband and I, at this time we were living in New Mexico. I'll preface that. We were living in New Mexico. That's where he was born. We decided we wanted to take a trip to the Grand Canyon around Thanksgiving. So this was about a week and a half before that trip. And on that trip, we get to the Grand Canyon. We got there by train.
Right.
So we have no car there. We're sitting on the rim. And that night, we're only there for one night, really. He gets sick, so sick that he throws up, and his whole pack and play is just covered in vomit when I found him the next morning. And I believe, and I can't really prove this honestly, I think he had a seizure, because he was just almost lifeless.
Just so you know, no one can prove anything. You're the mum, and we trust you more than any white coat doctor or any qualification. Your story is who everybody, all of our people here, believe. We're not interested in any scientific corrupt validation here. Okay, this is your story.
I know. But, and he was just so sick. So sick. I mean, I was just terrified. I thought, what am I going to do? We're sitting on the Grand Canyon with a bunch of cabins. What are we going to do if we need to take this kid to the hospital? Because he was so beyond sick and just totally out of it. We finally did leave and then made it back home. But really, from that point on, it was just worse and worse and worse and worse. To the point where, so that was about 6 months old. By the time we made it to our 9-month appointment, the doctor pretty much looked at me and handed me a brochure and said, I think you need to consider therapy, which I didn't understand. I said, what for? What do I need therapy for? Is this a very common thing? I didn't understand. And she just looked at me and said, yep, it's pretty common, and walked out the door. And so from that point on, my son has been in speech therapy, OT, physical therapy.
Has he got an actual diagnosis?
He has. He finally got diagnosed when he was 3.5. With autism.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's been a roller coaster.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's been a roller coaster. And since then, we've moved around quite a bit. And, we moved to Alabama for a while. And we just came back a year ago. And, we're finally starting to get down a journey of, biomedical and whatnot. Okay. And we finally figured out that he has Lyme, because all along I've been complaining to every doctor that would try to listen to me that there was something else wrong with him. It's not just autism. There's something wrong with him. Physically wrong inside. Nobody would listen to me. Nobody. Everybody wanted to do, psychotropic drugs. Everybody wanted to do more behavior modification. Everybody wanted to do, more therapies. Nothing was making that big a difference. We were spending thousands and thousands of dollars doing all these therapies, and nothing was making a big difference. We finally made it to a doctor that would listen to us and figured out that he has Lyme. He also has PANS from the Lyme and the brain inflammation. And, you know, we're on this path.
Now, well, tell me, you had another child.
I do.
And did you vaccinate her?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
And how's she doing?
She is doing, I would say, fairly well. She's 6 years old. She's in first grade. And, but I will say that she was recently diagnosed with ADHD. And I really feel like when she had her kindergarten shots, there was something there that happened to her as well.
Have you stopped vaccinating your children?
I am
now?
done. I am completely done. And I will say that I really want to say thank you to you, because when I started to watch this is what changed my mind.
It's not me, it's the
No.
people. Do you hear that? It's you.
It's just amazing, because I decided that I wanted to understand why people had this opinion about this. And I said, you can't discredit it unless you understand, right?
Right.
So I finally decided to look into it and really understand why, is when I realized.
Listen to the parents.
Well, not just listen to the parents, but really understand what's there, what's behind all this stuff, what's the toxins to this. And when I really realized that, you know, from birth, because I always thought, oh, he's been this way since birth, You know, even though I felt there was something else wrong there, I just thought, oh, it's always been since birth, it can't be the vaccines, it can't be. But when you realize what they're doing right from birth, how are you ever to know? How are you ever to know what the difference between a non-vaccinated or a vaccinated child is if they're doing it right from birth?
And that worries me, that that's what they want. That's why they've started heavily vaccinating pregnant women and stuff. It's so sick.
You'll never know. You'll never, ever, ever know.
Well, your story is incredibly important, and there's a lot of people here giving you so much love. You're getting hearts and love, and you know, I'm sorry that welcome to the family, and I'm sorry that we're having to say that, but these people are all here. They have your back, your baby's back, and collectively we say no more vaccines.
That's right, no more. Never again.
Now, is there anything else you want to say? You've got a big load of files there. What's going on in there?
Know, I brought some of his medical stuff, and when he was 2.5, we were noticing he was not speaking, and we decided to do an MRI. And they did the MRI, and even on his papers it says that he has a possible demyelinating disease, as an ADEM. And they told me at the time that it was probably just from having they called it a spot on his brain, which was really, they said, it was probably just from having an infection of some sort. And I said, well, he's never had anything like that. He was not really a very sick child, I would say. You know, other than that one sickness when he was 6 months old. You know, he wasn't constantly sick, because I stayed home with him, so he really didn't get exposed to like a lot of other, you know, daycare or anything like that. But even in their report, ADEM is, and I'm probably going to say this wrong because I can't see these big words. Acute disseminated encephalomyelitis.
Sounds good to me.
Which is brain inflammation. And, you know, when we had this done, they said, there's nothing you can do. There's no big deal. We saw this little spot, but we just think it's just nothing. So, I mean, from time and time and time again, and this is just 2.5 years old, you know, they just would not ever recognize that there was anything. And I guess this is, you know, from a viral or bacterial infection, which can obviously be caused by a vaccine. Yeah, it's crazy to me that, you know, over and over and over again, you know, we've just had this information kind of, you know, these doctors have had this information and nobody ever wanted to do anything about it or help this child.
And I've seen a much increase in the last few years with the development of 4G, 5G. 10 to 15-year-olds are now having a 533% increase in rectal cancer. And children are so much more susceptible. Their skulls are thinner and they have this developing nervous system, and we know that's a big deal. I had a patient who was always wearing the AirPod in one ear, and they said when they quit wearing it, they felt like a sensation there for a few days.
Join 18 EMF experts from April 10 to 15 at the 2025 EMF Hazard Summit. Discover how to reduce risks from AirPods, smartphones, Wi-Fi, and other sources of EMF exposure. Your children and grandchildren are counting on you. To register, visit emfhazards.com.
Homeopathy was attracting the most well-known, well-respected literary greats, corporate leaders, and educated people.
The important part is, does the stuff work?
There is strong research evidence demonstrating it works, and yet nobody will believe it.
I wasn't really sure. I was skeptic. When I went to the doctor, he said to me, "Well, what are you taking? What are you doing? You're way, way better."
Homeopathy will effectively restore health rather than simply put a Band-Aid on their symptoms.
This is the medicine of the future. This is the medicine we've all been waiting for.
This is 21st century medicine.
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.